never been on whatever, friend. You may not have all the approval of the world, but friend, you matter to God. You matter to God. Maybe you spent your whole life trying to gain the approval of somebody who's never going to give it to you. Friend, if you haven't got it by now, friend, you're probably not going to get it. I've known people, I've counseled people that have spent most of their whole life just trying to get the approval of their parents. And I've said before, friend, if you haven't got it by now, then you're probably not going to get it. Just get over it. Come on, let's go on. Let's look at what God has to say about you. Friend, you matter to God. You don't need somebody else's approval to be happy in life. Your happiness is not dependent upon the approval of other people, but it's dependent upon God and what He has to say about you. If you build your whole worth upon what other people think about you, friend, you're in trouble, because there's always going to be somebody that doesn't like you. You look shocked over that. How could somebody not like me? Friend, somebody don't like you. I'm going to tell them the way it is. And if you back your whole system on that, friend, we're in big trouble. Make the most important person in your life Jesus, because He will tell you the truth. He will love you no matter what. The problem with these 4 different areas of the world: appearance, affluence, achievement, approval. All these are so unstable. They're unreliable sources of security. We could go right on down the list. Our beauty fades. Anybody want to give a testimony on that one? It fades. Somebody saying, I can't believe you just put that picture up there. If you think you're not looking so great right now, just wait another 10 years. Well, you can see this is going nowhere. I'm going to get on. The only solid foundation for self-esteem and feeling good about yourself is understanding how much you matter to God. How much you matter to God. That's what I want to look at. This story about a corrupt government official who you think, man, this guy is corrupt. He's no good. He's a cheater. He's a thief. He's a swindler. He is a bad person. He rips me off. He rips everybody off. He is nothing but a big crook. How could somebody like that matter to God? Now, how many are at least better than the guy I just described? Two people. Three. What kind of church we have here, Dallas? Let's try to see it. How many are better than this? You're not a thief. You're not a crook. You're not a liar. You're not a scoundrel. You don't rip people off. You don't cheat. You don't smoke, chew, and go out with girls to do. Okay. How many are at least better than that? This guy was bad to the bone. I mean, there wasn't a good thing about this guy. He was a crook. He would come to your house. He would rip you off. He would come to your house and say, I'm going to have this much money. If you don't give me this much money, Nathan, you are going to jail. Yeah, whoa. I don't have that much money. How much you have? None? We do have a problem with that. He threw people in jail. And he had the power, he had the government behind him to throw the people in jail. I mean, this guy is bad. He's a crook. And yet, amazing, he mattered to God. Wow. There are a lot of people that I look at sometimes and I marvel, and I just like to flesh out for a few minutes with them and slap them. I can't. Don't tell me you didn't feel like that in the last government thing with this guy's been in the news, right? In Luke chapter 19, we're going to find out about this guy. He was a scoundrel. Luke 19, Jesus was going through the city of Jericho. A man there was named Zacchaeus. He's the chief tax collector. Everybody say chief tax collector. Chief tax collector. And this guy was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but he was too short to see above the crowd. So he runs ahead to a place where Jesus would come. He climbs up into a sycamore tree so he could see him. When Jesus comes to that place, the sycamore tree, he looks up and he says, Zacchaeus, hurry up, get down. I must stay at your house today. Zacchaeus comes down quickly. He welcomes him gladly. All the people saw this and began to complain. They started what? Who was complaining? Why were they complaining? Because Jesus is staying with a sinner. But Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord at his house, I will give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anyone, I'll pay them back 4 times as much. Jesus says to him, salvation has come to your house today. This man's a true son of Abraham. In other words, he's the real deal. He's in with us. And I, the Son of Man, have come to seek and save people like him who were lost. Now, this guy Zacchaeus, this is an amazing story. Of the 4 ways that we judge our value system, this guy struck out on all 3 of them. Remember how the 4 ways the world values the value system? Appearance, affluence, influence, and achievement. Approval. Out of the 4, 3 of them he strikes out on. In the first place, Zacchaeus does not like the way he looks. I want to ask anybody in this room here that maybe you don't care for the way you look. Man, I wish I just looked like so-and-so. Man, I wish I could look more like this. Wow, if I just had a little more hair, or if I had a little less this, or if I... And the list can go on and on. Zacchaeus really didn't like his appearance either. The Bible tells us that he was a short guy. Just a little guy. You got to watch the little guys. In fact, he was so short that he couldn't see above the crowd. He's shorter almost than everybody else in the city. He is a short guy. Tradition, when you look in history, you look in tradition, it tells us that Zacchaeus was most likely one of the shortest men of all the men in the city of Jericho. In fact, the Greek word for short describes the body of an undeveloped child. This man is not just short. A lot of people are short. I said a lot of people are short. But he is abnormally short. He's a little person, probably poor. He's abnormally short. Now, because of this, and he didn't like the way he looks, he didn't want to be short. Because of this, can you imagine the way that Zacchaeus was probably brought up? Probably been teased and ridiculed most all of his life about his height. Kids can be cruel and ruthless on the playground. I mean, they can be cruel. You can remember, some of you can reflect back, some of you have flashbacks right now of things that were said to you while you were on the playground. Kids can be even meaner than adults. Probably most of Zacchaeus' life, he's been given hurtful, cruel, hard nicknames. We learned very quickly. Don't worry about the opinions of other people, because he was constantly being made fun of. He didn't like his appearance. Abnormally short, he's stunned, he falls short, and then number 2, Zacchaeus is not liked by anybody else either. He didn't like himself, he didn't like the way he looked, but nobody else liked him either. You ever felt like that? So his approval rating is 0. In fact, he was not just a tax collector, he was what kind of tax collector? He was the chief tax collector. I mean, the chief, they're hated by everybody. Nobody likes the chief tax collector. Tax collectors are never popular people. It's like going to the telephone, calling up the IRS and say, hey, why don't you come over for dinner tonight and just do an audit with me? Not something you normally would do, right? Well, that's how people felt about Zacchaeus. I mean, they don't want nothing to do with him. He's a crook. They don't want anything to do. And in fact, in those days, it was even worse because the Roman tax system was 100% corrupt to the core. You think ours is bad? Theirs was really bad. In first place, in order to become a tax collector, you had to bribe an official to get the job. Because once you got it, you were going to make a whole lot of money, and you had to bribe an official just to become a tax collector. You had to be dishonest just to get the job. No wonder nobody didn't like him. Then in the Roman tax collection system, Rome didn't really care how much the tax collector collected as long as they got their percentage. I mean, they had a very corrupt system. You could collect 2, 3, 4, 5, sometimes as much as 10 times the amount that Rome required, but as long as they got their percent, they didn't care what you did with the rest. And the tax collector can go to your house and say, Alice, I need you to pay. This is the amount of tax you need to pay. If you don't pay it, we are going to send you to jail. And the tax collector had the power, had the government stand behind him, and he could throw Dallas in jail if he wouldn't pay the fee. Crooked to the bone. This guy is a crook. And second, this was so corrupt, he would get rich off of you by his dishonesty, and there's nothing you can do to stop him from doing that. Crooked system. This guy, isn't it any wonder nobody likes him? He don't like himself. Nobody in town will like him. He's a rip-off. He's going to rip you off. He's going to take your money. He's going to get very wealthy off of you, off of ripping you off. Makes you feel really good, doesn't it? For a Jew, Zacchaeus, which Zacchaeus is, he's a Jew. And for a Jew to become a Roman tax collector, think about this. What's wrong with that picture? That doesn't normally happen because it's like treason for a Jewish person to become a Roman tax collector. He's a Jew. It's like going over to the enemy's side. It's no self-respecting Jew would ever consider being a Roman tax collector. It's unthinkable. Nobody's going to do that. Without a doubt, Zacchaeus was disowned by his family because no family wants to have a son who's going to commit treason and go to Rome and collect taxes. Disowned by his family, his friends. In fact, in those days, you are barred from worship, going to worship. If you worked for Rome, you could not go into the Jewish temple or the synagogue to worship if you worked for Rome. He barred. You couldn't go there because they thought you had sold out to Rome. He said anybody who was a tax collector for Rome was considered in the same class as a murderer. That's how the Jews looked at him. How many know this guy wasn't very popular? This guy's not the kind of guy everybody wants to hang out with. He's not the kind that you want to call up and say, hey, Zach, want to go to Finish Line this morning for some breakfast? Hey, Zach, you want to go down to Warner's? You want to go to college and get some lunch today, or you want to go somewhere to eat? Nobody wanted to be seen with him because nobody liked him. He not only has an appearance problem, he's got an approval problem. Nobody was approving of him. Worst of all, it said he's the chief tax